We're joined now by the Reverend John Martin, pastor of Foundation United Methodist Church in Vestal. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Bob. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's great to have you on the program.
Well, thanks for letting me come in.
I've thought for years you might wind up on the program, and today is the day it finally happened.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I remember you back, we'll say decades ago, at least 2 or more decades ago at the Owego United Methodist Church. But even then, I had a sense that you were likely to do some very interesting and great things. And as time has proven, that is the case. You've been very, very busy over the last several years.
We absolutely have. Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad you remember good things from me. I was just at Owego United Methodist Church yesterday talking with a pastor about the number of people in that church who yelled at me decades ago for mischievous things that I did. So,
I may remember a few of those things too, but by the same token, I remember when I was that age too, and I always hoped that people, when I was growing up in Endwell, that people who remember me from that era also will generally say, gee, I have sudden amnesia. I don't really recall specifically what Bobby did, although I know it was probably pretty wild. I every once in a while, I run into a guy who knew me from, say, my teen years.
Yeah.
And he'll say, so he runs a restaurant in Endwell. He says, Bob, you used to be such a quiet, shy guy. What happened? So something happened at some point to turn me from a quiet, shy guy into a guy who's on the radio asking questions. So
sure.
That's the interesting things that happen, the transitions that happen in all of our lives. Now, ultimately, what we're going to tell people is some exciting news about the Foundation United Methodist Church, because soon the church will be moving to a new prominent location on the Vestal Parkway. But before we get to that, let's talk just a little bit about your life, how you got to this point where you now are overseeing a new and vibrant church in Broome County.
Sure. So Bob, basically, from my troublemaker days in Owego, I went off to college to be a pastor. I went on to seminary, got a master's degree to continue to be a pastor, and I've been serving churches for the past 16 years as a United Methodist Church pastor. So I started with some little churches. We moved up north of Binghamton to a town called Oxford, New York. From there, we moved all the way up to Lake Placid, New York. While we were in Lake Placid, we got this real strong call. We took it as a call from God to start a brand new church back home, back in this area, specifically in the community of Vestal, New York. And so about 2 years ago, we moved back to Vestal. I moved my wife and my 3 children. Everyone was scared. Everyone was lonely. Nobody knew really anyone in town. And yet we moved here to start a brand new church. Fast forward 9 months from there, and we launched Foundation UMC on April 8th, 2017. So if you're good at math, you know our church is about 15 months old, so we're like a toddler. We're just learning to walk. Our first location where we're currently at, 400 Mirador Road in Vestal, it's right behind the Vestal High School, has been just a huge blessing to us. But there was an opportunity to partner with another United Methodist Church, the former Calvary United Methodist Church, and take over that location on the Parkway. And so as our church has grown, this seems like the next natural step for us.
Seems what you outlined about the path you've taken over the last several years shows a real sense of faith. I mean, truly, you're living your faith, because at every one of those junctures where you got involved in something new, there was a lot of uncertainty. There was no exact roadmap for where you and your wife and your family would ultimately wind up.
That's true. Yeah, there were a number of places, a number of times where we felt like we were taking what at least felt like a big step of faith. What I found with faith, though, and I hope other people can resonate with this, is that often when you take those big, scary steps and you look back in hindsight, you realize that the step wasn't that big, it wasn't that scary, and God had you the whole time. And that's really been true for us. The number of paths that God has made clear and doors that God has opened on our behalf, we feel incredibly blessed.
Our guest is John Martin, pastor of Foundation United Methodist Church in Vestal. I think it should be pointed out that you had some important role models. Your parents and others serve to guide you and basically put you on this path that you're continuing on today.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Not just my parents. So Bob, you know this. I grew up in Owego, New York. I grew up attending the Owego United Methodist Church. As a matter of fact, as a young man, I had a number of Sunday school teachers and pastors who saw through the mischief, saw through the little boy who didn't pay attention in church, and saw something that could be more. Folks such as yourself, and they stood to show me, model a path of something better than just getting in trouble.
Well, and the bottom line is, everybody, regardless of the situation that you were born into, everybody has to explore and learn and basically make mistakes. You make mistakes at all part of the learning process. Hopefully along the way, you learn a few things. So some things that you did that might not have been particularly advisable, that you won't repeat the same things. So, and I think that's one of the things that the people in the church in Owego understood. I think they understood over the decades. They understand today that when it comes to guiding young people and also older people who are all on a path, that, yeah, everybody, each of us has made some mistakes and sometimes some pretty big errors. You could call them errors in judgment, poor choices or whatever. But if you learn from those experiences and then put that knowledge to a good use, it makes you stronger.
Sure. By the way, Bob, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that while, we share this story of Foundation Church, and we say that we moved from Lake Placid, New York, with just 5 of us to Vestal, New York. And we talk about how we launched April 8th, 2017, with 117 people coming on that very first Sunday. And we've grown this church that's filled with young children and excitement and energy, a desire to not only build a community, but to help people reclaim their faith and make a difference in this community, in this world. We have not done this alone by any means. As a matter of fact, we've been incredibly blessed, not only by other United Methodist churches like Owego United Methodist, Oxford United Methodist, Endwell United Methodist, but by other churches that aren't a part of the United Methodist Church at all. Churches like Two Rivers Church in Binghamton and New Life Church in Endicott. These churches and their pastors especially have been huge blessings to us with prayers, with gifts, with wisdom and experience, and we can't tell our story without paying some tribute to them and the faith and commitment that they've shown to God's work in this area.
That's one of the things that has been evident to me over the years in so many different situations. For example, after the Owego Church sustained massive damage from the flooding that happened in September 2011, there was a great deal of support from other churches in the village of Owego, Tioga, Broome counties, but also a lot of support from people who had no idea where Owego was, people elsewhere in New York or Pennsylvania and probably other states who came in and put in a lot of effort to clean up a massive mess. And it demonstrated, and another case in point involves Grace Lutheran Church in Vestal. After they sustained a devastating fire, they received assistance from other churches and other people in the community until they were able to build a new building and finally in the last several weeks get into their new home. But you see this play out with great frequency, and although some of the stories do get a certain amount of news coverage, most of the stories never get acknowledged beyond the small circle of people who are affected.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's the cool thing about being a part of a group of faith like the Christian community, is that we're a part of this much larger thing, much bigger than our own church or our 4 walls, much bigger than our community, in many cases much bigger than our state or even our country. And so we have people from all over the world, all over the country, all over the state, supporting us and working toward the same goal or the same ends as we are.
Let's talk about what is going on with organized churches these days, because one of the things that made me a bit sad as we approached the end of June was the reality that, say, the Calvary United Methodist Church, which had served that faith community at the location on the Vestal Parkway for 64 years, that era was coming to a close. Also, at the same time, just a few miles away in Binghamton, the High Street United Methodist Church was closing after being a part of the south side of Binghamton for well over a century. So what we saw there were some endings, and I talked with one of the people who had been affiliated with the High Street Church for many years, and although he was sad, he said, well, it is a bittersweet experience. He said, it is the story of life. There are beginnings and there are endings, and you have to accept that. And the truth is, I mean, whether we're talking about Methodist churches, Catholic churches, a lot of the traditional organized religion and churches and worship sites have closed over the years, especially in the Northeast, as we've seen some major changes in terms of demographics, with a lot of young people moving out of the area and some of the older people who were so critical to these churches as they die, and they're not being replaced necessarily by new families. But it's an interesting dynamic that's going on now, where some of the traditional churches do have to close down, but at the same time, with the example that you have given us with Foundation United Methodist Church and several other congregations here in the Southern Tier, there is new life that's happening.
Yeah, that's right, Bob. You know, we live in this tension in our congregation right now. Foundation has brought on some of the Calvary congregation into our midst, and some of them are very, very excited about this. Some of them are very, very afraid. Some of them, honestly, are angry and frustrated. And there are times when, as we get to know this Calvary story so much more, and the faith and the wisdom and vision that went into building that church, to starting that church in that location, and all that went into that, there are times when I think the natural tendency is to think, isn't this sad? This has ended. And yet what we see that we're doing at Foundation is we're not taking this in a new direction or doing something different. Those people who started that church, those people who for 64 years have been faithful to that mission and vision, we see ourselves as a continuation of that. And so we're reaping fruit that was planted by people 50 years ago, generations before us, when they had the vision to start this church there. And so what we see that we're doing as we move into Calvary is, we're keeping that church from becoming a hotel. The Parkway is filling up with hotels and businesses.
And I was just over there less than an hour ago, and you've got some people who are working, making some improvements before you move in, but it didn't escape my attention. Directly across the street, construction workers are also building the next big Vestal hotel, and that is notable along the Vestal Parkway corridor. Now, it's lined with lots of hotels and lots of retail sites, and to have, and I'm not sure if there are any other churches or religious facilities along the Parkway corridor. None immediately come to mind, but indeed having new life in this building. It's a beautiful building too, and it's so prominent and being sort of, if you will, especially this morning with the brilliant blue skies. I couldn't help but marvel as I took pictures of the exterior of the church from next to the Vestal Parkway. It was a beautiful day, and to me, because the last time I had been there was a day or two before the official closing of Calvary United Methodist Church, and it was a stormy, dark, nasty day. I mean, there was torrential rain when I was taking pictures, and so I couldn't help but really appreciate the difference as this transition moves forward with the building that soon will be brought back to life.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we think there's a lot of opportunity in this location. One of the things that we're most excited about is that immediate neighborhood right behind the church. I don't know how many of those community members know that there's a church there beyond the fact that bells ring every hour or every day at noon. But we're really excited to move in there and make sure that they know we're there and bless them. One of our primary goals, especially in those early days, weeks, and months that we move into that location, is to bless our neighbors, is to let them know that we're there, and hopefully have them say, we are so glad that they're here. And for us, that's just a huge part of our vision. Again, our vision is all about building community, reclaiming faith, and making a difference a positive difference in our community.
Tell me about the initial steps, and I know it's complicated, so you don't have to go into excruciating detail, but give us just a sense of what it's been like to get the new church off the ground. As you mentioned, you had a lot of support. You have ongoing backing from the Owego Church and from others. But give us a sense of how you actually go about doing that. It sounds great. I could have come up with a plan for this on paper, but as far as execution of such a plan, I would probably find myself helpless.
For us, the big thing is yeah, you got to go out and do it. It's absolutely scary. I tell everybody it's just as amazing as you think it is and just as terrifying as you think it is. Starting a new church is very similar to starting your own business. So any of our small business owners out there, they know so much better than most what this has been like for us. But essentially, you're gathering a group of people who agree with your vision, who think that what you're doing is the right way to do it, is the right direction to go into. And then you're looking to expand that group. One of the early mantras that we had at Foundation was that we existed for the already and the not yet. Those who are already a part of us, already on board with what we're doing, and those who are not yet there. And I think that's unique to the church in many ways. The church is an organization that, if rightly understood, in our opinion, exists exclusively for those who are not yet a part of it. And so we don't exist for our membership. We don't exist for the people who come on Sunday. We want to exist for those people who aren't yet a part of us. We want to be reaching into their lives and offering them something good, something positive that makes them want to become a part of us. But you know, there's the nuts and bolts of gatherings, you know, musicians. Our church is contemporary worship, so it's non-traditional, which means we have drums and guitars and stuff like that. So you're gathering.
Do you have an organist?
We do not have an organist.
I didn't think so.
We do tell people, though, that we're convinced that worship, rightly understood, can be done in any way. So in this very building, there's WHWK, the country radio station.
Yep.
We want to have a country worship service someday, but right now we're primarily contemporary worship.
Actually, it's an interesting overview or worldview of trying to find a way to serve as many people as possible, because indeed, say with this radio cluster here, what we do here on News Talk is appropriate to people of a certain age and certain interest, but as you say, the Hawk with their country music, they've been number one since 1984. From the moment that they went on the air in 1984, they've been the market leader, and they appeal to all sorts of demographics, from very young to very old. Then we have a classic rock station that appeals to people of a certain age and tends to skew male. But we also have Wild 104, which is a top 40 station appealing to teenagers and those typically in their 20s. And then we have another AM station, a sports station. So trying to serve as many groups as possible, and with the realization, too, no matter what you are, whether you're in the broadcast industry or whether you're trying to reach out and help people in their faith journey, you can't be all things to all people all the time. You do have to be realistic, but you also have to understand that people do have different needs and different interests, and even those needs and interests change as they go further. What might be appropriate for some people today may not be appropriate in 5 years. Absolutely.
And I'll tell you what, one of those needs and interests that we think a lot of churches fill, but not as much as they could or should, maybe. You know, a part of our vision is this idea of making a difference. And we think that, look, connection to God is making a difference for you personally in your life. But we think that also inspires, or should inspire and drive you out to make a difference in your world. And so one of the things that we do at Foundation is we try to give people opportunities to do that, not just to say go make a difference, but give them real tangible chances. And so one of the very first projects that we got involved in is we partnered with an organization called Soul Hope. And what Soul Hope does is they go into places in Africa where children have no footwear. Because they don't have footwear, they have these parasites that attach themselves to the children's feet. It makes it very painful and very difficult for them to walk or even move around. They come in there and provide medical care, and then they provide shoes, footwear for the children to wear after the fact. And what we did by partnering with this organization is we helped construct the materials for those shoes. And so we made 100 pair of shoes with this tiny brand new church, one of our very first Sundays. We spent way too many hours working on it, but we knew that we were helping make a difference for children that we would never know, that we would never see, and yet we were helping them to have a quality of life that they didn't know prior. And these are the kinds of things that we do every single month at Foundation. Every month we get involved, whether it be local or global like that, trying to make a difference in our world.
So what's ahead? I understand you have a schedule that's already been established. You have set a date for the first worship service at the new location on the Vestal Parkway?
That's correct, yeah. So right now we're doing some work in the space. We're doing some preparatory work. We're going to have some contractors coming in there, some other people coming in there and doing work. We think what we're going to do is really enhance the beauty that's already in the space. Some of the best parts of that sanctuary, many people walk in and they say, oh, the brick, the beams, it's so beautiful in this sanctuary. And we think that we're really enhancing what's good about that space. But we're going to be doing some work July and August. And then September 9th, we're going to have our very first Sunday service there. It's going to be a big deal. September 9th, Sunday at 10:30. It's going to be kind of a huge thing. And then immediately after that, the very next Sunday, we're having what we're calling a back-to-school bash, where we're going to be inviting the entire neighborhood, the entire community in. And we're going to have things like bounce houses, dunk tanks, carnival games, free food, cotton candy, all the goodies. Invite everyone in to have a big party. And for the kids, we're going to do a blessing of backpacks. School can be stressful and scary for kids. We want to offer them some kind of blessing and, of course, a super fun day after church that day. So we've got some plans going forward.
It sounds exciting. I wish you and all the members of Foundation United Methodist Church the best in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you very much, Bob.